I just have one thing to say. Hang on here.
You could have subscribed to any other YouTube channel, but you chose to subscribe here. So, hit that notification, hit that like button, and tune in with Adrian and Glib Talk. If you talking to hear your own voice, that's Glib. Using your platform to poop and pimp, that's Glib. I can sell drinking water to a fish with Glib. Tune in for a discussion with Glib. It's Glib Talk, Glib Talk, Glib Talk. 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 Let's all get right on the late night with a little discussion or a heated debate on sports, news, current events. Glib Talk is where you gotta tune in for facts and different opinions. This is Glib Talk, hosted by Adrian, who will dissect the dichotomy of the fake news by its views. Trying to get to the truth, or we could just shoot the shit. We all trolls in his, that's why the chat stay lit. In the live stream where everyone clowns let off a little steam. So go ahead and smash the like button. You can subscribe to the page, turn on the notification for the live stream and upload updates. If you talking to hear your own voice, that's Glib. Using your platform to poop and pimp, that's Glib. I can sell drinking water to a fish with Glib. Tune in for a discussion with Glib. It's Glib Talk, Glib Talk, Glib Talk. 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 I hope you enjoyed tonight's show.
Mic check, mic check. See if this thing is working.
Go ahead.
I think we might be good. Yeah, I love this song, Taylor. It's my boy Bizzle Kong. If you haven't subscribed to Bizzle Kong, subscribe to Bizzle Kong. That's my boy. Man, like I've been wanting to go live. I've been wanting to do videos, but I just don't have it in me to do it. And like every day I see a news story or something. Like there's a story out right now. I don't know if you guys have seen this young man, 21 years old or something, 21 or 22, went missing from Gwinnett County in Georgia, and supposedly he went to meet a young lady and then he disappeared. He left the house. They got him on video leaving the house with a bag, and then somehow his truck ends up in Detroit. Now maybe he was making a Tubi movie, because a lot of Tubi movies are made in Detroit. I'm not sure what happened to him, but it is unfortunate that this young man walked out his house hoping to go meet a nice young lady that he found on the internet, and instead he found himself missing, and his car ended up in Detroit. That's a damn shame. Now I wanted to talk about that because they haven't been looking. I don't know if they're looking for him or not, because he left the house with a bag, which probably meant that he was planning on staying for a while. But this other young lady goes missing, tells a ridiculous ass story that everyone knows is ridiculous, and they talk about it for 3 weeks. I just saw the chief of police in Alabama had an interview on Fox News, a 20-minute interview to talk about a case that's been solved. And they could be talking about this guy. They could be putting his picture up, all kinds of shit to help find this guy. Yeah, what's up, D? Yeah, exactly. You heard it. Like they could be looking for this guy. They could be helping him. They could be putting his picture on the internet, talking about his story, saying, yo, this dude is missing. You know what they did for this guy? They put up his mugshot. You know what I'm saying? Which is fucked up. Now, I'm a mugshot guy. I got a new show coming. It's the name of the show is called Glib's Galling Guessing Game. And the game is going to be in the same style of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but you're just going to guess what crime or what weapon did people use to commit a crime based on the mugshot. If you can get it right, you probably can win up to $100. No purchase necessary. It's going to be fun. But when I saw that his mugshot was being used, I said, this is fucked up. Everyone else who goes missing, they show a picture of him sitting on the beach. They show a picture of him hanging out with their friends, graduating from college or some shit. They put up his mugshot. And I thought, man, this is wrong. You know what I'm saying? This guy hasn't committed a crime. He's the victim. This is not right. This is not right. But anyway, I hope they can find this guy. Let's see, D says the family's going crazy here. I can believe it. I could believe the family is going crazy, and it's not fair to the family that this is how his story was portrayed. They could have did a lot more for him. They could have did a lot more for him to get the story out, so that way people were aware of what's going on. But I could say it's race. I could say you can come up with a whole lot of reasons of why but it's the reality that they ain't looking for this guy. There was another guy who was found in a barrel last week in Malibu, some river or lake or somewhere in Malibu. Some rapper. They shot him in the head and put him in a barrel, and that just washed ashore. That was also a pretty jacked up story. But like interesting. Like I had probably 25 stories that I had saved to talk about. I just don't have the energy or the time, or maybe I just need to find a different way, because I just look at what's happening on YouTube and how people are moving and what they're doing, and I don't see how what I do fits in with what they do. So I guess that leads to me being unmotivated to participate unless I just do my own thing and kind of pull back and separate from I guess the other stuff that was affiliated with me. And with that being said, my boy Black Rosebud lost a page, and I don't know why. I don't know what happened. YouTube hates him for whatever reason. His page is gone, and that's messed up. And I hate that it's happening to him, but I understand why it's happening, because the content that he creates on YouTube does not meet the community guidelines or the policy for content that can go on YouTube, often because it's untrue, not factual, or just a straight up lie, the spread of a conspiracy. And that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that that's where he has gone to. But I would say to him that you've joined the cult, Black. You've joined the cult. And when you join the cult, you might be the last one to know that you're in one. Now, I shared a video the other day that I didn't find it. Someone else shared it, and I heard it and said, this is the truth. And the guy in the video, his name is Steve Deese. He's a conservative. He's a lunatic. He's a Christian conservative right-wing nut. But he also has realized that Donald Trump is leading a cult, and the people who follow him are probably in a cult. He's gotten off the Trump train. Maybe it's financial. Maybe he says, you know what, I've lost too much following this guy, but I lose everything following him. He keeps getting money because people donate, because they just believe. But when I repeat what he says, when I do the things that he talks about, I get punished. The people from January 6th were part of the cult. The ones who still believe the shit was true, part of a cult. The ones who got arrested, part of a cult. The ones who are ready to fight and die for Donald Trump right now are part of a cult. The people who repeat the talking points are part of a cult. I want to read the indictment today, not because really anybody cares. I wanted to read it for myself, and I've held off on reading it because I said, why would I read this when I could read it on live and give commentary about it? But the reality is that the Trump supporters, without ever reading it or knowing what it said, developed an argument against it. And the argument they developed against it was what Donald Trump told them that it was going to say. Now, you can read it for yourself, or you can listen to someone else read it, and you can say, oh, well, that's not even what it says. That's not even what he's being charged with. But they formulated an argument, which is why they're going to lose this case. They formulated an argument against something that's not what he's being charged with. They're not even arguing the point that they're talking about. So they're talking about two different things. And it's unfortunate that these people have found themselves in a cult, but it's not surprising because they're cultish. But listen to this guy real quick. This is a Steve Deese show on YouTube.
No, you don't want to hear what I said last hour. I don't care, because it's what I believe you need to hear, because I think it's what we all need to hear. What are we doing here? We are going to the mattresses for these people. We are offering them more accommodation, more chances than we'd offer our own family members, for goodness sakes. And for what? To have Rudy Giuliani go down to Georgia and admit that he lied? Have Jason Miller tell the January 6th commission, yeah, we all knew it was BS. What is this? Some of you don't like it when I use the cult word, but when you like being treated like a schmuck and ask for more, that is a cult. I'm the mark. I'm the sucker. I want to be such. And I resent the person who tries to get me out of that. those are marks of groupthink, frankly.
And that's what happens, right? If you watch any, I used to listen to a lot of conservative right-wing news when I was younger. I was interested in hearing what the other side thought. I can't listen to what they say anymore because most of the time they're just repeating. They're just repeating the words that Donald Trump says or that Donald Trump's camp puts out. They just repeat it. They just repeat it over and over and over again. And it's like if they say, they feel like if we say it enough, the people will just go along with it. Now, I would typically call these people stupid or misinformed or, unintelligent or some other offensive word. But they're probably just in a cult, and they're the last to know. They're in a cult, and they're the last to know. And hopefully, some of them will come around. What's up, Roselle? Hopefully, some of them will come around as the facts become evident that Donald Trump, using his seat as the president, was attempting to overthrow the democratic elective process. He was attempting to circumvent it by using the system to stay in power. He's not the first person to ever do it. Criminals, it's easier for the criminals to use the laws against you because you have to follow. He's attempting to circumvent the rules while you have to follow them. So he's at this point saying, I can say whatever I want to say about any crime that I want to commit because that's my First Amendment right. Even in a criminal conspiracy in his mind, I can conspire with people to do a crime. And as long as they don't do it, I didn't do anything wrong because all I was doing was talking. That's where he's at with this. Which doesn't make any sense. If that was the case, no one would ever go to jail for conspiracy. No one would ever go to jail for anything, right? You be free to go as long as it didn't actually happen. And then I even heard Black Rosebud say, what is attempted? That means that he didn't do it. He attempted to do it, but he didn't do it. Well, he tried to do it, but he didn't do it. So attempted murder, you shouldn't get charged with anything because you tried to kill him and you failed. So you shouldn't get charged with attempted murder. You shouldn't get charged with anything. This is the logic they're using, which doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. I don't think anyone understands it or goes along with it except people who are in the cult. You have to be in the cult to be down with this shit. But this is the indictment that was filed on August 1st in D.C. And these are the charges he's charged with, right? Conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, conspiracy against rights. Now, none of that says that he told anyone to do something to create a riot, right? And this is what they're arguing, that he said something during the speech which caused an insurrection or a riot. That's not what he's charged with. He's charged with what happened up to January 6th and then maybe a couple days after when he was still trying to figure out ways to stay in power. That's what he's charged with. And I would think, right, that as a person who is curious, right, who does a lot of research, these Trump supporters, they do all kinds of research, they everything ask the question, tell you, do your own research. You would think that as a person who is curious, they would want to know, well, what the fuck was Donald Trump doing between November 4th and January 6th? Like, what were they doing? Like, why was he having all these meetings with these people? Like, what were they talking about? What were they saying? Well, everyone in this indictment, as far as what I've heard, are all Republicans. And they're all people who work for and work with Donald Trump. So this isn't the liberals going after Trump with liberals, or this isn't the liberals going after Trump with a bunch of Democratic operatives. These are people who Donald Trump hired or worked with, speaking about what Donald Trump was trying to get them to do. Now, you can look at that any kind of a way, but it doesn't appear as if that's the liberals doing something to him. This is Donald Trump doing something to himself and the people who he was working with, saying, I need to get off this goddamn train. As Lindsey Graham said, we got to get off this train. Fucking Lindsey Graham, fucking nut. Indictment. The grand jury charges that at all times material to this indictment on or about the dates and at approximate time stated below. The defendant, Donald J. Trump, was the 45th president of the United States and a candidate for re-election in 2020. The defendant lost the 2020 presidential election. Despite having lost, the defendant was determined to remain in power. So for more than 2 months following Election Day on November 3rd, 2020, the defendant spread lies that there had been outcome determinative fraud in the election and that he had actually won. These claims were false, and the defendant knew that they were false, but the defendant repeated and widely disseminated them anyway. To make his knowingly false claim appear legitimate, create an intense national atmosphere of mistrust and anger, and erode public faith in the administration of the election. The Democrat Party is a damn cult, and our operatives going after Trump. You're a cultist liar. I don't know who Blue Diamond Jim is, but I can promise you that in my thumbnail, there's a picture of Trump pointing at the screen, and it says, "Who's the mark?" Blue Diamond Jim, you're the mark. Have you donated to Trump's Save America PAC? I hope you have, because that way you can lose more money donating to Trump. The defendant had a right, this is where the Republicans didn't read this at all, because this is on page 2, and it's the third paragraph. It says it right here. The defendant had a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and even to claim falsely that there had been outcome determinative fraud during the election and that he had won. He was also entitled to formally challenge the results of the election through lawful and appropriate means, such as by seeking recounts or audits of the popular vote in states or filing lawsuits challenging ballots and procedures, which he did, and he lost all of them, 60 of them. Well, he did 60, and I think 59 of them he lost. Indeed, in many cases, the defendant did pursue these methods of contesting the election results. His efforts to change the outcome in any state through recounts and audits or legal challenges were uniformly unsuccessful. Shortly after Election Day, the defendant also pursued unlawful means of discounting legitimate votes and subverting the election results. In so doing, the defendant perpetrated 3 criminal conspiracies. A conspiracy to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to impair, obstruct, and defeat the lawful federal government function by which the results of the presidential election are collected, counted, and certified by the federal government in violation of 18 U.S. Code 371. A conspiracy to corruptly obstruct and impede the January 6th congressional proceeding at which the collected results of the presidential election are counted and certified in violation of 18 U.S. Code 1512K, and a conspiracy against the right to vote and to have one's vote counted in violation of 18 U.S.C. 241. So that's what they've accused this jackass. Let me see. Hold on a second. Let's see what Blue Diamond Jim is a trolling Trump supporter. Trolling Trump supporter. Let's see what they got to say. I hate Trump, but you're carrying water for the Democrats. How am I carrying water for the Democrats? All I'm doing is reading this document here. It sounds like you're supporting Trump, even though I'm not supporting the Democrats. I used to be a Democrat until I got the fuck out the DNC cultist plantation. Well, that's good for you, Jack. It's good for you. Blue Diamond Jim. Trump supporting troll. Each of these conspiracies, which built on the widespread mistrust the defendant was creating through pervasive and destabilizing lies about election fraud, targeted a bedrock function of the United States federal government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. Count 1. The allegations contained in paragraphs 1 through 4 of this indictment are re-alleged and fully incorporated here by reference. The conspiracy. From on or about November 14, 2020 through on or about January 20, 2021 in the District of Columbia and elsewhere, the defendant did knowingly combine, conspire, confederate, and agree with co-conspirators known and unknown to the grand jury to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to impair, obstruct, and defeat the lawful federal government function by which the results of the presidential election are collected, counted, and certified by the federal government. purpose of the conspiracy. The purpose of the conspiracy was to overturn the legitimate results of the 2020 presidential election by using knowingly false claims of election fraud to obstruct the federal government function by which those results are collected, counted, and certified. The defendant's co-conspirators. The defendant enlisted co-conspirators to assist him in his criminal efforts to overturn the legitimate results of the 2020 presidential election and retain power. Among these were co-conspirator 1, an attorney who was willing to spread knowingly false claims and pursue strategies that the defendant's 2020 re-election campaign attorneys would not. What's up, team? Okay, look at this, right? Co-conspirator number 1 is Rudy Giuliani. And Rudy Giuliani has admitted through court filings that he lied. I don't know if Blue Diamond, I don't know if you know this, Blue Diamond, but Rudy Giuliani admitted through a court filing that he lied. That everything that he said about Ruby Freeman and her daughter Shay Moss was a lie. And that if you were repeating what he was saying, well, you were just repeating his narrative, which was a lie. But, I mean, obviously you can just go with what you feel. You can go with what you think. You can go with the truth. Now, you can listen to me and say that I say Rudy Giuliani is a liar. Or you can listen to Rudy Giuliani say that Rudy Giuliani is a liar. The choice is yours, Blue Diamond, because I don't have to debate you about whether Rudy Giuliani is a liar. Rudy Giuliani has said, I am a liar. And since he says he's a liar, I'm going to take his word for it. Co-conspirator number 2, an attorney who devised and attempted to implement a strategy to leverage the vice president's ceremonial role overseeing the certification, proceeding to obstruct the certification of the presidential election. And this is weird, right? Somehow they came up with this idea that we can just have the vice president say, this is the person who should be the winner. Because I think that there was fraud or whatever that he come up with. And then he can just do whatever he wants to, throw the votes out, send them back, whatever. There's a deeper plot and plan that's going on in our country. And I don't know if you noticed, Blue Diamond Jim, but there was just a major Supreme Court ruling that basically said that the states could not just systematically just redraw their lines, redistrict their lines, and it wasn't up to appeal. The states felt as if it should not be able to go before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court disagreed with that. And with that challenge, several states, North Carolina, Alabama, there were 3 states that had to redraw their lines. But the thing about that was this: if the states had unfettered control over how to run their federal elections, the state of North Carolina, in this instance, if the vice president says we're going to send this back to the state representatives would get to pick the president in that state, and there was nothing no one could do. The citizens would not get a vote if that's what North Carolina so chose to do. And that's what happened when that Supreme Court case 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, whenever it was, actually it was probably more like 4 weeks ago because it was in June, when that case was lost. What the Republicans are attempting to do was make it so that no matter what happened, they can just allow the Republican state houses to select who the president should be without there being a vote. So it doesn't matter who they voted for. That's what they're going for. That's what they were trying to do. This jackass says 3 billion people voted for Joe Biden. Not 3 billion, but I think it was 7 million more that voted for Trump, though. There was that. Co-conspirator 3, an attorney whose unfounded claims of election fraud, the defendant privately acknowledged to others sounded crazy. Nonetheless, the defendant embraced and publicly amplified co-conspirator 3's disinformation. Co-conspirator number 3 is Sidney Powell. She's a nut. Everyone knew Sidney Powell was a nut, but she was willing to say the crazy shit that Trump wanted someone to say. And in Trump's mind, he feels like lawyers have the ability to say anything they want to say, and they won't get in trouble for it because they say, I'm just representing my client. So Trump doesn't say anything illegal, right? He has his attorney go out and say it. And the attorney goes out and says all kinds of wild, crazy shit. And Trump says, oh, it wasn't me, it was my attorney. And the attorney says, oh, it wasn't my thoughts. I was just representing my client. The only people that know this isn't political persecution are the 30%. I don't even understand what you're talking about. Like, I'm almost willing to block you at this point because I don't know what you're talking about. We're not even having the same conversation here because I'm reading what Trump is charged with, and you're living in the world of imagination. Because I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're listening to. I don't know what, you know what I'm saying, what thoughts are going through your head as I'm reading what he's charged with. You're imagining something else and then arguing against that, which is probably more fun and more entertaining than what I'm talking about, which is why you have nothing to say to what I'm saying. Let's see. Co-conspirator number 4, a Justice Department official who worked on civil matters and who, with the defendant, attempted to use the Justice Department to open sham election crime investigations and influence state legislators with knowingly false claims of election fraud. This is another thing that he was trying to do. I can't remember this guy's name right now, but he was willing to say, I'll be the attorney general. I'll be the attorney general, and if I'm the attorney general, then I'll just say there's all this fraud, and we'll say there's investigations going on. Then the vice president will have to send the votes back to the state house where we already have this case going before the Supreme Court that says that we would be able to do whatever we want to do with those votes when they come back, and that the state representatives of that state would be able to get to select who the president was if they said there was some kind of fraud or otherwise. This was their plan, but it failed because the Department of Justice other employees said, if this guy becomes the attorney general, so you can do this, we're all just quitting. The whole department, we're all just gonna quit because we're not gonna go along with this fucking shit. Co-conspirator 5, an attorney who assisted in devising and attempted to implement a plan to submit fraudulent slates of presidential electors to obstruct the certification proceeding. I can't remember who that one is. And co-conspirator number 6, a political consultant who helped implement a plan to submit fraudulent slates of presidential electors to obstruct the certification proceedings. I don't know who that guy is either, but when they revealed who co-conspirator number 5 is, but I don't know who 6 is, and they haven't said who 6 is yet. But it'll be interesting to see who that person is. The reason why this is interesting is because this actually reads like a Tubi movie, right? It's a terrible plan with a terrible conspiracy with all these people who are doing what they're doing quite publicly. And now they're all saying, well, we were doing it publicly. It wasn't a crime. No. You were doing criming, and you were doing criming publicly. That's what happened. Which I mean, I guess is better for all of us that we can see it and know what happened. But it would be better for them had they not decided to do all of their criming so publicly amongst people who weren't down to go to jail for Donald Trump, or not in jail, because these motherfuckers is going to prison. And this is all, he's being accused, right? So I guess you have to say that he's being accused of these crimes, but he hasn't been convicted, so he's going to have the right to defend himself, but he's going to have to defend himself against this indictment, right? This is their case. So this isn't me, this is he, right? This is the federal government. The federal government function by which the results of the election for president of the United States are collected, counted, and certified was established through the Constitution and Electoral Count Act, a federal law enacted in 1887. The Constitution provided that individuals called electors select the president and that each state determine for itself how to appoint the electors apportioned to it. Through state laws, each of the 50 states in the District of Columbia chose to select their electors based on the popular vote in the state. Now those two sentences is what I was talking about when they're talking about send them back to the state, where the state gets to choose how those electors are appointed. So if those electors, if somehow the vice president could say, I reject this slate of electors because there was fraud, the state could determine how to distribute those electors. And the state could say, well, we're going to send it to the state house and we'll let the state house choose the president. We'll let the state representatives of that state choose them. And in every single one of these states, there is a conservative majority in the state house. So this is like a second bite at the apple to win the election. Well, you didn't win a popular vote of the state, so let's send it back to the state and then let the state representatives vote. because there's more Republicans than Democrats, so he'll win that election if he can't win the general election. That's what they're attempting to do. That's the conspiracy. Through state laws, each of the 50 states and District of Columbia chose to select their electors based on the popular vote in the state. After Election Day, the ECA required each state to formally determine or ascertain the electors who will represent the state's voters by casting the electoral votes on behalf of the candidate who had won the popular vote, and required the executive of each state to certify to the federal government the identities of those electors. What's up, 3,000 degrees? Then, on a date set by the ECA, each state's ascertained electors were required to meet and collect the results of the presidential election. That is, to cast electoral votes based on their state's popular vote, and to send their electoral votes along with the state's executive certification that they were the state's legitimate electors to the United States Congress to be counted and certified in an official proceeding. Finally, the Constitution and ECA require that on the 6th of January, following the election day, the Congress meet in a joint session for a certification proceeding presided over by the Vice President as President of the Senate to count the electoral votes, resolve any objections, and announce the result, thus certifying the winner of the presidential election as President-elect. The federal government function from the point of ascertainment to the certification is foundational to the United States democratic process, and until 2021 had operated in a peaceful and orderly manner for more than 130 years. I listened to Black Rosebud video. I told him I was going to read this because I know Black Rosebud won't read, right? He will not read, but he will listen. So if I gave him a video of someone reading this, he'd listen. But if I were to tell him to read it, he wouldn't read it. If I sent him the link to read it, he wouldn't read it. Black Rosebud made a video that says they're going after Donald Trump because of the KKK, and he had some wild ass theory about the KKK and racism and some other shit, and I'm like, they're going after him because he tried to circumvent the election process, and he was trying to come up with the legal way to do it. Hitler. I reference Hitler not because I'm a fan of Hitler, but because Donald Trump was a fan of Hitler. And Hitler says in Mein Kampf, he says that the way to take over the government is to infiltrate the government and destroy it from within. Hitler tried to do a physical coup. He tried to physically take over the government, and they failed. They failed. And he went to prison. That's why when he was in prison, he wrote Mein Kampf. When he was in prison, he said, you know what? You can't overthrow a government physically. You've got to infiltrate it and then just take over from within. Use their laws against them, which is what Donald Trump is trying to do when he's trying to find any loophole to plant himself as the winner of the election that he clearly lost, that he knew he lost. Manner and means. The defendant's conspiracy to impair, obstruct, and defeat the federal government function through dishonesty, fraud, and deceit included the following manner and means. The defendant and co-conspirators used knowingly false claims of election fraud to get state legislators and election officials to subvert the legitimate election results and change electoral votes for the defendant's opponent, Joseph R. Biden Jr., to electoral votes for the defendant. That is, on the pretext of baseless fraud claims, the defendant pushed officials in certain states to ignore the popular vote, disenfranchise millions of voters, dismiss legitimate electors, and ultimately cause the ascertainment of and voting by illegitimate electors in favor of the defendant. He basically was just saying, just say that I won. Just say that I won. Just in Georgia, just say that I won. In Arizona, find fraud. Wisconsin, find the fraud. There's fraud. In Michigan, there's fraud. Find it. If you can find it, I can win. If I can just get one of you guys to say this, I can use that as the precedence to say there's fraud other places. But I need someone's got to say it. But that person who says it is going to have some legal exposure, right? Because he doesn't have the evidence to say that what he's saying is true. Therefore, if something really goes down, he's on the hook. Not Trump, because Trump didn't ask you to do it. Trump didn't tell you to do it. Trump saying that it's there, you got to do something about it. You do something about it, and then next thing you know, your ass is going to jail. The defendant and co-conspirators organized fraudulent slates of electors in 7 targeted states: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, attempting to mimic the procedures that the legitimate electors were supposed to follow under the Constitution and other federal and state laws. This included causing the fraudulent electors to meet on the day appointed by the federal law on which legitimate electors were to gather and cast their votes, cast fraudulent votes for the defendant, and sign certificates falsely representing that they were legitimate electors. Some fraudulent electors were tricked into participating based on the understanding that their votes would only be used if the defendant succeeded in outcome determinative lawsuits within their state, which the defendant never did. That's fucked up. It's fucked up that Donald Trump took these poor schmucks, these cult members, these poor schmuck cult members who didn't know no better. Hey, this is what we want you to do. We want you to do something that is completely illegal and sign your name to it. Sign your name to it. That way, if something goes wrong, it was you who did it. I didn't tell you to do it. I suggested this is what could be done. You did it. So it's on you. These people in Michigan, there is the state has gone after these people. In other states, they have not. And I was listening to some people talk about it, and they were saying, you know, some of the people were actually co-conspirators. They knew what they were doing was wrong, and they were in on it. Other people were they were just smucks. They were just someone who they were taking advantage of. They thought that what they were doing was participating in the normal process, and if something else happened, then something else would happen. But the something else never happened, and what they were participating in was actually illegal. That's what happened. And it was fucked up that Donald Trump did it. One more reason why the cult members should be stepping away from the cult, but that's just me. The defendant and co-conspirators then caused these fraudulent electors to transmit their false certificates to the vice president and other government officials to be counted at the certification proceedings on January 6th. The defendant and co-conspirators attempted to use the power and authority of the Justice Department to conduct sham election crime investigations and to send a letter to the targeted states that falsely claimed that the Justice Department had identified significant concerns that may have impacted the election outcome, that sought to advance the defendant's fraudulent elector plan by using the Justice Department's authority to falsely present the fraudulent electors as the valid alternative to legitimate electors. If only he had someone else that an attorney general who would say it. If only he had someone else who was willing to go out on a limb and say, oh yeah, what Donald Trump is repeating is the truth. He didn't have that person to come out and say it. Therefore, he doesn't have the ability to get the authority behind it. But he was trying. He was trying to convince anyone who wanted the power, step up to the plate and just say this shit. I just need you to say it. And that urged on behalf of the Justice Department the targeted states' legislatures to convene to create the opportunity to choose the fraudulent electors over the legitimate electors. The defendant and co-conspirators attempted to enlist the vice president to use his ceremonial role at the January 6th certification proceeding to fraudulently alter the election results. First, using knowingly false claims of election fraud, the defendant and co-conspirators attempted to convince the vice president to use the defendant's fraudulent electors, reject legitimate electoral votes, or send legitimate electoral votes to state legislatures for review rather than counting them. When that failed, on the morning of January 6th, the defendant and co-conspirators repeated knowingly false claims of election fraud to gathered supporters, falsely told them that the vice president had the authority to and might alter the election results, and directed them to the Capitol to obstruct the certification proceeding and exert pressure on the vice president to take the fraudulent actions he had previously refused. Now, I don't know how Mike Pence has waited all this time to talk this shit if he's trying to win the election. But if I was trying to be president of the United States and this is what I had in my back pocket, I would have been saying this on day one. I would have been saying this on day one. The guy who you want to win wanted to subvert the process to select the president and place himself at the top. And he wanted me to do it for him. That's what Mike Pence should have done. Now Mike Pence has to fight against these lunatics anyway, because this comes out and it tells the truth. And now Mike Pence wants to say, hey man, I'm too honest. No, you was a jackass. You was a jackass. You shouldn't have been affiliated or associated with that guy anyway. But since you were, now you get to suffer the consequences. Those people hate you, and they're probably going to kill you if they get a chance. Those people hate you, and they're going to kill you if they get the chance. Mike Pence. After it became public on the afternoon of January 6th that the vice president would not fraudulently alter the election results, a large and angry crowd, including many individuals whom the defendant had deceived into believing the vice president could and might change the election results, violently attacked the Capitol and halted the proceeding. As violence ensued, the defendant and co-conspirators exploited the disruption by redoubling efforts to levy false claims of election fraud and convince members of Congress to further delay the certification based on those claims. This is the reason why Mike Pence wouldn't get in that damn Jeep, right? They tried to put Mike Pence in an SUV on January 6th, and he says, I ain't going nowhere. Because he knew what they were trying to do. He knew what they were trying to do when they were trying to get him to leave. When the Secret Service says, oh, we got to get you out of here to a safe place. He's like, nah, man, I know what this is. We didn't know what it was. If you're a Trump supporter, you should want to know. You should want to know why the fuck, you know? But, you know, the truth isn't on their side, and the truth isn't on his side. So he's just going to tell the lie that he tells. Mike Pence didn't have the strength or the courage or whatever the hell he says. Some wild shit. The defendant's knowledge of the falsity of his election fraud claims. The defendant is Donald Trump, by the way. The defendant, his co-conspirators, and their agents made knowingly false claims that there had been outcome determinative fraud in the 2020 presidential election. These prolific lies about election fraud included dozens of specific claims that there had been substantial fraud in certain states, such as large amounts of dead, non-resident, non-citizen, or otherwise ineligible voters had cast ballots, or that voting machines had changed votes for the defendant to votes for Biden. These claims were false, and the defendant knew that they were false. In fact, the defendant was notified repeatedly that his claims were untrue, often by the people on whom he relied for candid advice on important matters and who were best positioned to know the facts. And he deliberately disregarded the truth. He knew that the shit that he was saying wasn't true, but he continued to say it. Even though the people who worked for him that he trusted the most said it's not true, even the people who he should rely on for good counsel were saying, we don't have any evidence of this shit. He was like, nah, fuck that. Keep saying it. The defendant's vice president, who personally stood to gain by remaining in office as part of the defendant's ticket, and whom the defendant asked to study fraud allegations, told the defendant that he had seen no evidence of outcome determinative fraud. Mike Pence said, hey, look, you told me to do my research. I did my research. You know what we found? There is no evidence of this fraud. The senior leaders of the Justice Department, appointed by the defendant and responsible for investigating credible allegations of election crimes, told the defendant on multiple occasions that various allegations of fraud were unsupported. Now, if the Justice Department are people who are appointed by Donald Trump, he's the president. The Attorney General, the people who work for the attorney, everyone, they're all Republicans. They're all Donald Trump's people, and they're saying, we don't have any fraud. The thing that you're talking about, we don't see it. We're looking, but it's not here. The Director of National Intelligence, the defendant's principal advisor on intelligence matters related to national security, disabused the defendant of the notion that the intelligence community's findings regarding foreign interference would change the outcome of the election. That somehow some server in Italy was flipping votes from Trump to Biden. Why would that doesn't make any sense. But just in case you were wondering, the person who's in charge of the entire nation's national intelligence says, that didn't happen, sir. As Donald Trump likes to say, everyone calls him sir. They said to him, sir, we didn't find that. That didn't appear to have happened. But that didn't stop Donald Trump from saying it over and over and over again. And this is the ridiculous one. The Department of Homeland Security's cybersecurity and infrastructure security agent, whose existence the defendant signed into law to protect the nation's cybersecurity infrastructure from attack. This is Donald Trump's agency with Donald Trump's appointed director at the helm. Donald Trump created this agency, and he put the person in charge who he wanted to be in charge. Joined an official multi-agency statement that there was no evidence any voting system had been compromised, and that declared the 2020 election the most secure in American history. Days later, after the CISA director, whom the defendant had appointed, announced publicly that election security experts were in agreement that claims of computer-based election fraud were unsubstantiated, the defendant fired him. He was unwilling to say what he wanted him to say, and he fired him to hire someone who would say what he wanted him to say. This guy told the truth. He lost his damn job. Senior White House attorneys selected by the defendant to provide him candid advice informed the defendant that there was no evidence of outcome determinative election fraud, and told him that his presidency would end on Inauguration Day in 2021. Damn, shit, this is a lot of people been telling this motherfucker what you say is not true, man. Senior staffers on the defendant's 2020 re-election campaign, whose sole mission was the defendant's re-election, told the defendant on November 7th that he had only a 5 to 10% chance of prevailing in the election, and that success was contingent on the defendant winning ongoing vote counts or litigation in Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin. Within a week of that assessment, the defendant lost in Arizona, meaning that he had lost the election. State legislators and officials, many of whom were the defendant's political allies, had voted for him and wanted him to be reelected, repeatedly informed the defendant that his claims of fraud in their states were unsubstantiated or false, and resisted his pressure to act based upon them. State and federal courts, the neutral arbiters responsible for ensuring the fair and even-handed administration of election laws, rejected every outcome determinative post-election lawsuit filed by the defendant, his co-conspirators, and allies, providing the defendant real-time notice that his allegations were meritless. He knew that what he was saying wasn't true. He knew that what he was saying was false. He knew that he didn't have a leg to stand on. He knew that he had lost the election. He decided to go with what he believed or what he wanted to hear, which was that he won the election. And I don't know if that's how it works. I don't know if just because I know they said, like, if you believe it, you can see it or achieve it or whatever the hell. I believe I can fly. I believe I can be the president if I just keep saying it. If I just keep saying this shit, eventually I'll just be there. But I don't know how it works. Like, there was an election, they counted the votes, he lost, and that was it. And it doesn't matter how much he believes he won or how much it hurts his ego or his pride or whatever to say that he lost, he lost. And it's not, to me, it's not even a debate. Unless you want to debate with what the Department of Justice says happened. Like, I'm not debating anything. I'm just saying this is what they say happened, and I was alive when it happened. I remember. I remember when this shit was happening. So there's no conspiracy for me. The defendant widely disseminated his false claims of election fraud for months, despite the fact that he knew and in many cases had been informed directly that they were not true. The defendant's knowingly false statements were integral to his criminal plans to defeat the federal government function, obstruct the certification, and interfere with others' rights to vote, interfere with others' right to vote, and have their votes counted. He made these knowingly false claims throughout the post-election time period, including those below that he made immediately before the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. The defendant insinuated that more than 10,000 dead voters had voted in Georgia. Just 4 days earlier, Georgia's Secretary of State had explained to the defendant that this was false. But it doesn't matter if it's false. It doesn't matter if it's false. It doesn't matter if you explain it to him. It doesn't matter if he knows it or sees it. What he believes to be true is what he believes to be true. He's going to go with that one. The defendant asserted that there had been 205,000 more votes than voters in Pennsylvania. Now, I've looked this one up myself. It's not true. It's not true at all. But, what can you do if someone repeats something? If someone says something and someone repeats something, how do you defeat that? Unless you look it up for yourself. The defendant's acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general had explained to him that this was false. The defendant said that there had been a suspicious vote dump in Detroit, Michigan. The defendant's attorney general had explained to the defendant that this was false. And the defendant's allies in the Michigan state legislature, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and majority leader of the Senate had publicly announced that there was no evidence of substantial fraud in the state. And Donald Trump is not dumb, but he thinks that the people he's talking to are dumb. and he says something and they repeat it, which makes them something, right? I'm not sure if it means that they're dumb, misinformed, ignorant, or they're just possibly in a cult. But prior to the election, and probably as far back as I can remember in elections, is that there's rules about how the votes get counted. Some states count all the votes, and then when at 8 o'clock when the voting stops, those votes go right in. Those are the mail-in ballots. Those are everything that was received prior to election day. You get a number right then. Boom. Other states say we're not going to touch those until after we count all of the votes for the day. So you get a vote count for the day, and then after they get through those votes, you get a increase in the vote, because there was all of these votes that we've been holding on to that we didn't touch yet. That's what happened in many of these states where you say there was a dump. It's like, well, they didn't count those votes because that's how their election rules go. They don't count them until after they've counted the people that voted that day. Then those votes get counted. But if he just says, oh, there's these dumps, look, you can see it. See right there, there's a big spike that happened. Well, yeah, there was a big spike because those are people that have been voting for the last however much time early voting was going on. And then all those went in all at once. But he doesn't have to tell you that, and you don't have to know that. But if he tells you that's a conspiracy, then you would have to know more about how it worked to understand whether it was a conspiracy or not a conspiracy. In this instance, that's just how it happens. And it happens like that every single time. And they tell you, if you watch the damn election shows before the election, they talk about it every single damn time. Every single time they explain the different states and what the states' rules are about how they count their votes and what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. Now, you can say it's fraud, and you can just say, oh, wow, that's how it goes. But anyway, the defendant claimed that there have been tens of thousands of double votes and other fraud in Nevada. The Nevada Secretary of State had previously rebutted the defendant's fraud claims by publicly posting a facts versus myths document explaining that Nevada judges had reviewed and rejected them, and the Nevada Supreme Court had rendered a decision denying such claims. The defendant said that more than 30,000 non-citizens had voted in Arizona. The defendant's own campaign manager had explained to him that such claims were false, and the Speaker of the Arizona House of Representatives, who had supported the defendant in the election, had issued a public statement that there was no evidence of substantial fraud in Arizona. His own campaign manager and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, who was also a Republican, said, listen, man, it's not true. What you're saying is all of this a liberal conspiracy? Is every single one of these people who work for and with, who would be due to gain by Donald Trump staying in power, all part of the liberal conspiracy to go against Donald Trump? It doesn't make any sense. Donald Trump's campaign manager would be substantially richer if Donald Trump had won. He would have gotten a bigger role in Donald Trump's organization, and he would have been paid like a king if Donald Trump had won, but he lost. And he probably doesn't work for anyone now because he's tainted because he dealt with Trump, or he's working for Trump because Trump doesn't want him to get too far away from him because he doesn't want him to become a co-defendant, a co-conspirator or a witness against him. The defendant asserted that voting machines in various contested states had switched votes from defendant to Biden. The defendant's attorney general, acting attorney general, and acting deputy attorney general all had explained to him that this was false. And numerous recounts and audits had confirmed the accuracy of voting machines. The criminal agreement enacts to affect the object of the conspiracy. The defendant's use of deceit to get state officials to subvert the legitimate election results and change electoral votes. Shortly after election day, which fell on November 3rd, 2020, the defendant launched his criminal scheme. On November 13th, the defendant's campaign attorneys conceded in court that he had lost the vote count in the state of Arizona, meaning, based on the assessment the defendant's campaign advisors had given him just a week earlier, the defendant had lost the election. So the next day, the defendant turned to co-conspirator one, Rudy Giuliani, whom he announced would spearhead his efforts going forward to challenge election results. From that point on, the defendant and his co-conspirators executed a strategy to use knowing deceit in the targeted states to impair, obstruct, and defeat the federal government function, including as described below. On November 13, 2020, the defendant had a conversation with his campaign manager who informed him that a claim had been circulating that a substantial number of non-citizens had voted in Arizona was false. On November 22nd, 8 days after Arizona's governor certified the ascertainment of the state's legitimate electors based on the popular vote, the defendant and co-conspirator 1 called the Speaker of the Arizona House of Representatives and made knowingly false claims of election fraud aimed at interfering with the ascertainment of and voting by Arizona's electors as follows. So this is so Donald Trump will tell you this is all about freedom of speech. But this is about to explain the crime that he actually committed. This is the paragraph that's going to explain the crime that he was committing while he was speaking to people in Arizona, trying to get them to go along with his plan, because they established that he knew that he lost. The people that worked for him told him he lost. He knew he lost. Arizona. The defendant and co-conspirator 1 falsely asserted, among other things, that a substantial number of non-citizens, non-residents, and dead people had voted fraudulently in Arizona. The Arizona House Speaker asked co-conspirator 1 for evidence of the claims, which co-conspirator 1 did not have, but claimed he would provide. Co-conspirator 1 never did so. Co-conspirator 1 is Rudy Giuliani, and Rudy Giuliani has just admitted in court in Georgia that he lied on Ruby Freeman, on everything he said about her being part of the conspiracy to switch votes, count fake ballots, and all the other wild shit he was saying about them in Georgia. He has admitted in court, he submitted to the court a statement that said everything that I said about her was false. She's absolutely right. I was lying. So this is a guy who says, I got the goods and I'm gonna give it to you, of which he never did. Why? Because he's a liar, and he was lying then, and he's a liar now, self-determined to be a liar. The defendant and co-conspirator 1 asked the Arizona House Speaker to call the legislature into session to hold a hearing based on their claims of election fraud. The Arizona House Speaker refused, stating that doing so would require a 2/3 vote of his members, and he would not allow it without actual evidence of fraud. So look, this guy's saying, hey, look, man, if you got evidence of fraud, I'll do it. But I won't do it without evidence of fraud. And even if you do it, right, even if I just do what you're asking me to do, it's going to require a 2/3 vote. So I got to get 60% of the people to just go along with me because you say, if you have evidence of fraud, we can present it. Do you have evidence of fraud? Rudy Giuliani's a liar. He has no evidence of fraud. He's a liar. He's just lying. The defendant and co-conspirator 1 asked the Arizona House Speaker to use the legislature to circumvent the process by which legitimate electors will be ascertained for Biden based on the popular vote, and replace those electors with a new slate for the defendant. The Arizona House Speaker refused, responding that the suggestion was beyond anything he had ever heard or thought of as something within his authority, which is true. And if he had went along with it, he'd be co-conspirator number 7. On December 1st, co-conspirator 1 met with the Arizona House Speaker. When the Arizona House Speaker again asked the co-conspirator for evidence of the outcome determinative election fraud he and the defendant have been claiming, co-conspirator 1 responded with words to the effect of, we don't have the evidence, but we have lots of theories. So this is what he's saying, that they should call in a special House session and reject the election because Rudy Giuliani say so. And when they say, what's the evidence? Rudy Giuliani's response is, we don't have the evidence, but we have lots of theories. Now, you could say this is nothing. This is just two guys talking, having a chat. But if the person who he's talking to believes what he's saying and follows along, the conspiracy is no longer an attempt. It's no longer an attempt to circumvent the election process. They're circumventing the election process. They attempted to. But they failed because there were people in place who said, wait a minute, if I do this, it's on me. If I do this, I did it. Donald Trump didn't tell me anything. other than that, look, there's lots of fraud. Maybe you should do something. And if I did it because he said so, I'm the one who'll be punished. I'm the one who's going to pay the price, not Donald Trump. This guy says no, and Donald Trump, I think this guy got voted out. I'm pretty certain that guy got voted out. On December 4th, the Arizona House Speaker issued a public statement that said in part, no election is perfect, and if there were evidence of illegal votes or an improper count, then Arizona law provides a process to contest the election, a lawsuit under state law. But the law does not authorize the legislature to reverse the results of an election. This is what Donald Trump is asking for. Donald Trump is saying, call them into session, recall the votes, and just say that I won because there was fraud. That's what Donald Trump is asking to do. They said there's a way that we can do this if there's evidence of illegal votes, but you got to show me the evidence of illegal votes of which they don't have. Because Rudy Giuliani's the ones that's telling them this, and Rudy Giuliani's a liar, right? So Rudy Giuliani's lying because they don't have the evidence. So this guy says, well, there's a process to do it, but we're not going to do it because you say. If you can give us the evidence, then we can have a lawsuit. And if we win a lawsuit, then we can fucking do something different. But we're not going to do this just because you say. As a conservative Republican, I don't like the results of the presidential election. I voted for President Trump and worked hard to re-elect him. But I cannot and will not entertain a suggestion that we violate current law to change the outcome of a certified election. I and my fellow legislators swore an oath to support the U.S. Constitution and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona. It would violate that oath, the basic principles of Republican government, and the rule of law, and we attempted to nullify the people's vote based on unsupported theories of fraud. Under the laws that we wrote and voted upon, Arizona voters choose who wins, and our system requires that their choice be respected. And this is where I'm going to stop right here. 18. It's 6 o'clock, and I got to get this food off the grill. But look, I appreciate you guys listening to me. I'm going to read some more of this. I'm on page 11. So it's 45 pages. Let's see. Maybe so look, I was reading this thing and it says that you should read read 30 minutes a day. And I'm trying to be a better person to read 30 minutes a day. But why would I if I can read on live and then create a little content and give some commentary instead of talking to my damn self? It'd be good for me. I hope you guys got something out of this. Maybe not. I don't know. I hope that a Trump supporter listens to this. I hope that a Trump supporter listens to this and says, oh man, damn, maybe I should go read this for myself. It sounds like they was up to some fucked up shit. that would be the ultimate goal, with that one Trump supporter would listen or read and say, damn, they really was trying to get me. They was lying like a motherfucker. But listen, hey, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, subscribe to this channel. We're gonna start doing a show. The show is gonna be called Glib's Galling Guessing Game. We're gonna guess mugshots, try to figure out what crimes they committed, what weapons they use, all kinds of ridiculous shit. There's gonna be a cash prize. No purchase necessary. It's gonna be fun. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed yet. It should be interesting. I appreciate you guys clicking on the play button. If you haven't hit the like button and subscribe. And I'll holler at you guys later on Glib Talk. Peace.
If you talking to hear your own voice, that's clear. Using your platform to poop and pimp, that's clear. I can sell drinking water to a fish with Glib. Tune in for a discussion with Glib. It's Glib Talk. Glib Talk. Glib Talk. It's Glib Talk. Glib Talk.